All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Aware Athlete Show. As always, I'm your host, Scott Forrester, and today we're very pleased to have with us as our guest, Cheryl Ilov. And Cheryl is an author, a speaker, a ninja. She is the founder of the Feminine Ninja Project podcast. She is an expert in the art of movement, and she is a Feldenkrais practitioner. One more thing, she describes herself as a recovering physical therapist. So Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So Cheryl has a story that involves many things, but it involves a journey from chronic pain to vitality. So Cheryl, let's just delve right into your story. And what are some of the things that you were interested in as a child growing up?
Oh boy. When I was a little girl growing up, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. And one of the things I loved more than anything else was just to explore our yard. We had a huge yard. I lived in a house. My father actually built the house himself with his own two hands. And when I was quite young, I had two older sisters. Later, as time went on, I got two more sisters, the younger ones. So I'm smack in the middle of a family of five girls. So it was a really interesting way to grow up, but we had a huge yard, lots of trees, lots of birds. And I just loved exploring more than anything else in the world. And I loved watching how things were growing in the yard. And I wasn't expecting to go here, but that's an interesting question. So I'm just going to go with the flow. One of my very favorite stories as a little girl was a poem, and it was titled...
Cheryl, do you want to back up just a minute while my wife makes my dog quit barking? I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry, because that's actually another thing that I love more than anything in the world is dogs. I did run a dog rescue for several years after I finished physical therapy school. And up until last month, I had three dogs upstairs, and now I only have two. And I have my husband on guard duty to make sure they like to break into what I call a spontaneous rendition of the song of my people, which means they have a howling contest.
Okay. Well, with that aside, maybe we can just leave that in there then.
I guess so.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, dogs are very social.
They're very social, and they're a very important part of my life.
Yeah, mine too. Mm-hmm. So go ahead and finish up. The first part of your story, reason I asked that question is because it provides a very interesting contrast to where you went and where you ended up. So
exactly. Well, so my favorite story is a poem called The Sugar Plum Tree. Wonderful story, and it just really captured my imagination because it had everything in it. You know, it had a tree, a lake, an island, a dog, a cat. It was a gingerbread dog and a chocolate cat, and a tree full of candy. So my mother would read this poem out of a storybook that we had when we were children, and it just captured my imagination like nothing else did. And I just loved that poem and loved that sugar plum tree. So my mother would read it over and over and over again because I insisted. And as the youngest child at that time, I usually got my own way. So she would just read it over and over again. And you could tell my sisters were like, oh God, again, not again. So one time when I was running around the yard by myself, my two older sisters were in school. I was 4 years old, and I found a leaf or a seed from a sugar maple tree in our yard. And, you know, little whirly birds, they look like little helicopters, and you can spin them and they twirl. So I picked up this seed and I thought, sugar maple, sugar plum, same thing to a 4-year-old mind. So I took that little seed and I planted it in the backyard, waiting to get my own sugar plum tree, thinking I could grow it. And I told everybody at dinner what I did. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm sure you're going to get a sugar plum tree. And I'm sure they're all rolling their eyes. Well, a couple of weeks later, there was a sapling at that very spot where I planted my little seed. And to me, that was the most magical, remarkable thing that could ever happen. And I knew that thing was going to eventually grow fruit, candy. And I also was smart enough to know that it was going to take a while. We had plenty of fruit trees in our yard, so I knew it doesn't just happen overnight. So I would go out every morning and every evening and just watch my tree. So much that my father took the tree and transplanted it and put it in the front yard so I could see it from the front window. And a few weeks later, a miracle happened. My mom and my two sisters came running in to wake me up, and they said, "Oh my gosh, your sugar plum tree has finally bloomed." And I was so excited, and I went running outside, and the tree was covered with all kinds of candy. And it was like, I knew that this miracle just happened. And I was so excited. And everybody, of course, was so excited for me. Well, it took a few years for me to realize that my father had planted the sapling, and my sisters and my mom had covered the tree with candy. But what a wonderful memory. And it's like, that somebody would go out of their way and do something like that to make a child's dream come true. But it just really, really emphasized with me that, if you do believe in miracles, that they will happen. And to this day, I mean, I have the poem, I have it memorized, and I didn't even know I had it memorized until I was in my mid-20s and I was home for a visit. And my mom asked me, "Do you remember the sugar plum tree?" And I opened my mouth and I recited the entire poem. And they're looking at me like, "Okay, wait a minute. All those times you made me read it to you. And then when my sisters learned how to read, they had to read it to me. And I knew it all along." I did not even know. My brain had taken it in and it had recorded it. And there I was. I hadn't heard that poem for over 20 years, and I was able to recite it word for word.
Awesome. Yeah, and you didn't even know it was in there.
I
So
didn't.
that speaks to the things that are within us that we don't even know are there.
Mm-hmm. And it does kind of speak to the power of, imagination, number one, but that our nervous system is always taking in information that we hear, even when we're not aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as you grew up then, you became interested in ballet.
I did take ballet for 1 year, ballet and tap, when I was a little girl, when I was 4 or 5 years old. My two older sisters got bored with it pretty easily, and we always did things as a group. It was a whole lot easier for our parents to get us to places too, because my mother never learned how to drive until she was 37. So once my two older sisters lost interest in dance, I still went with a little girlfriend of mine, but it just wasn't the same. And so I quit, did one recital, and then I quit. So it wasn't until I was in college that I started getting interested in ballet. And I wasn't really that interested in it. But one of my cousins was at the same college that I went to. And she went to this adult ballet class, beginning ballet. And she says, you have to come and take it. You have to come with me. And I'm going, no, this sounds like the least interesting thing I would ever want to do is do ballet. It doesn't sound like fun. So I kept saying no. And one Saturday morning, she showed up at my dorm room with an extra set of leotards, tights, and ballet slippers and said, "You're coming with me." So it's like, okay, I went with her. I got hooked. And that was the beginning of a long-standing love affair. The sound of a dog barking, music to my ears.
Yeah, he's a watchdog. He sees something coming, he has to tell us.
Well, what if there was a squirrel in your yard? You'd have to know that, or knocking on your front door.
Oh, he protects us from squirrels diligently.
Very good.
Yeah. So everybody pause right now. You're looking at a ballerina with a rack full of swords behind her. So let's continue with the story then.
Okay.
So after you started ballet at an old age to start ballet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you picked it up anyway. And that's
Sure.
an accomplishment because a lot of people would think you can't do that.
There's a lot of things that people think we can't do, and a lot of them are related to age. And that you're absolutely right. A lot of people told me I was crazy which, that ship has already sailed, so that's okay. And a lot of people said, that's just stupid. You're going to be in a class with girls who've been dancing their entire lives. And that wasn't really true, because by that time, at that age, most women or guys are done with ballet. It's like, okay, now they just want to let go of it, explore something else, have some fun in their lives. And so I was picking it up at a time when most women would just drop it. And then I was in a class with other beginners, other adults. So it was so rewarding and so satisfying and gratifying to be able to share a passion that I didn't even know I had with a group of people who are as passionate about that art as I was at the time. And yeah, it was really hard, because if you've ever tried ballet, it's really hard. And for a body that isn't used to move like that, and trying to get those different kind of movement patterns in your body was really, really difficult. But, the music, the movement patterns, and even the accomplishment of when you're a rank beginner and you have no idea what you're doing, you make progress very quickly. So that's, instant gratification.
At first you do, don't you? Yeah.
At first.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. It's a big part of your story, the ability to try new things and believe that you could do them. And so that's going to lead right into the rest of it, because that's who you are. And so there's a lot of pieces to your story. You went to college.
I did.
You gained weight.
I did.
You sat and studied like you're supposed to.
Like a good student.
You became a physical therapist.
Eventually, yes.
And you practiced that for quite a while.
I did, at least 20 years.
So the ballet was actually very good for you. When I'm listening to your story, I'm thinking about the things that I like to do, and to move outside of them a little bit is probably very good for you. I don't want to do ballet, but as I imagine it, I think, yeah, boy, there's a lot of things you could challenge yourself with by doing different movements than you're used to. And so just imagining that, and makes me want to go do a Feldenkrais lesson.
That's really funny, because I was thinking about Feldenkrais today. I didn't have time, but I was like, I think I need to get down on the floor and just to do a little bit of awareness. And yeah, I mean, it's funny. It hits you when you least expect it.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of parts of your story, you became a physical therapist, you went to college, and you were in good shape. You loved the outdoors. You liked to do ballet, which is very challenging. And you have all this repertoire of movement patterns you can do, and certain strengths that other people don't have in their ankles and feet and so on. And then you sat on your butt for quite a bit. And what happened to your weight?
It went up.
Yeah, it went up. And then I think at some point there, you, who had never had any chronic pain, became a sufferer of chronic pain. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, this happened in my mid-30s. I was a respiratory therapist. That was my first career. So I was already in, Western medicine, the Western medical model. And what started out as just a little bit of discomfort and tightness in my low back, it was like, wow, this is unusual. So I did the logical thing. I ignored it, thinking it would go away. It didn't go away, it got worse. And so then I tried the next step, was hot packs and stretching, and that worked just as well as ignoring it. And what happened was, in a matter of just a few short months, that little twitch in my back spiraled way out of control to a chronic pain syndrome, where I was pretty much incapacitated for 2.5 years. I had pain radiating across my back, down both hips, both legs, into one of my feet. Of course, now I know it was sciatic pain, but I didn't know at the time, that wasn't my area of expertise. So I relied on all the medical professionals to help me out. And I, instead of going to Pilates and ballet class on my days off and, in my free time, I was going to all these doctor's appointments and physical therapy appointments and massage therapy. And, I was the model patient. I was Perfect. I did, took all the medications, the pain relievers, pain pills, muscle relaxers, anti-inflammatories, went to all the appointments, did all of the stretches and the exercises that my PTs gave me. I did everything. And instead of getting better, I was getting worse.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, it was just, it's not a fun way to live.
No, not at all. So can you comment there on when people go to PT and the physical therapist gives them some stretches or exercises or whatever, and some people respond to that and get better and some people don't. Could you comment on that?
Well, there's a lot I could say about it.
Yeah.
Number one, everybody is different,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, but when you're going to a physical therapist, you have a doctor's referral. And back then, now in the state of Colorado, you can just go to a PT. You don't need a referral. So I had my doctor's referral and I had my insurance and all that, but I was only able to receive so many visits, PT visits. I was only able to have so much time with a therapist. And then a lot of the other time I was either with an assistant or an aide, but even that was limited. And then after I would have my session, they'd send me on my way, send me with a couple of papers, with the exercises and the stretches on them. And I would go home and, diligently do them, do everything they said, and then come back the next week. And again, after being such a model patient and following everything exactly to the letter, not everybody's different. Not everybody responds the same way to the same thing. Our bodies are different. Our biochemistry is different.
Right.
Our experiences are different. Our tissues are different. Everything is individualized. And unfortunately, in that medical model, it was like, this is your diagnosis. This is what the ICD-9 code is. This is what the treatment protocol is. This is what you're going to do. And hopefully you'll get better. And I didn't. I just kept getting worse. And finally, until one of my, I think it was one of my physicians, said to me, you're never going to be able to do your grocery shopping and your laundry all in the same day.
Yeah, we've all heard that. Yeah.
Yes, haven't we? The arthritis in your spine is so severe, you're going to end up being bedridden. And then she told me to start applying for disability because I was going to need it.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I was like, wait a minute, I'm planning on going back to ballet class. And she laughed and said, you're way too old for ballet, number one. And, even if you wanted to do ballet, you can't because you're too old. And she knew I was planning on trying to pursue a career as a PT. And she says, you need to forget about PT school. You will never be a physical therapist because you're too broken. You can't do the work and you're just too darn old.
Yeah.
And I was 36.
That is so darn old.
I know, I was ancient, man. Yeah. So, for those of you listening, you might want to be taking notes, what not to say to patients. Do not take away their hope.
Yeah, I've experienced that a lot from different sides of the therapy picture.
Yes.
A lot of times the therapists mean well, and they're trying to get your head into reality is what they're trying.
Right.
So they do mean well usually.
Yeah, but that actually wasn't a PT that told me that. It was a physician. So.
Oh, and they were real good at it. Yeah. Yeah, because that's the way it is.
However, she was right. 20 years later, I realized that her prediction had come true. I could not do my laundry and my grocery shopping both in the same day because several days a week, I would wake up in the morning, I would drive downtown and I would take a professional level ballet class. Then I would turn around, change my clothes, drive across town and take an hour and a half martial arts class. And it was like, this is a whole lot better. This is a lot more fun. So I was too tired to get my laundry and my grocery shopping all done in the same day. I was too busy.
Okay, so she was right.
She was right.
She was too busy being an athlete.
Exactly. So she was right, but
Yeah.
the wrong reason.
Yeah. That's good, Cheryl.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess what I was getting at is exactly that people are different, and the medical system doesn't necessarily acknowledge that, but also the way people, if I gave 10 people an exercise to do, 10 of them each one would do it a little bit differently. Even though I told them, even though they're doing exactly what I said, but they would approach it differently. And some of them would approach it with more inner awareness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even though you didn't tell them to, they would.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then others would say, watch me, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Correct me, rather than feeling the movement themselves and being aware of what they were doing and how it was impacting them from a sensory level.
Exactly. Some people will do that just through their own experience,
Mm-hmm.
The way they view life, the way they act. Sometimes they'll do it without even realizing they're doing it. But they'll still.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry to interrupt, but that's exactly, Scott, how I got out of that chronic pain situation. I wasn't a Feldenkrais practitioner. I wasn't a physical therapist. I was just a human being trying to figure my way out of this horrible situation. And when that doctor had told me that, I hit rock bottom, and it took me a few days to realize I had this incredible epiphany. And it was, I have to figure this out on my own. And all I did was, I fired all my caregivers, much to their chagrin. I stopped taking all the medication. I stopped doing the exercises and the stretches because they weren't helping anyway. I knew enough about movement with the ballet background, and I had a very strong Pilates background even back then. So I started dissecting movement. And I intuitively did what I kind of learned in Feldenkrais, which was going back to the days of me and my little sugar plum tree, of how we learned how to move. Nobody said when we were babies, here are these little baby barbells, you have to do these bicep curls, and then put one hand here, and then you do this, and then you'll roll over in your crib, or this is how you sit up, this is how you stand up. We did it by exploring movement and exploring our environment. So that's what I intuitively went back to, because I realized I am doing something that's really aggravating this pain. And I got to figure it out. So that's what I did.
You did not believe the people who told you couldn't do it. Or maybe you did at first.
Thank you. That's exactly it. At first I did. I believed I was a chronic pain patient. I believed that I would, there was a chance I would never be able to move the way I did before. And then when she told me that, it was like a great big slap across the face, or a slap maybe with a proverbial 2x4 across the head. And that was the wake-up call that I needed. And then it was like, okay, I do not accept this. I am not going to accept this. As a 36-year-old woman who had been pretty healthy, vibrant, and active, skiing, that type of thing too, I wasn't going to accept that. I was going to find a way out of it, and I didn't care what I had to do it.
Yeah. So you came to that point because nothing else was working. So what other alternative is there? And I think ballet was quite a good education for that, because especially coming to it later, it was a real puzzle for you at times, wasn't it? A movement puzzle?
It was absolutely a movement puzzle, but I was approaching ballet, and this is so embarrassing to admit, I really didn't have very good body awareness. I did not have that mind-body connection. I was just watching people do ballet, and I was trying to force my body into positions. I was trying to force myself to move like these other people that I was watching, especially when I was, by the time I got to my 30s, I was taking more and more advanced classes. So I was trying to look like the advanced dancers. And let me tell you something, that wasn't going to happen. And the more I tried to do that, the more, I would just get myself tangled up in knots and frustrated. And, maybe that was even one of the reasons that started the chronic pain issue. I don't know. But really, I think what happened was that, I decided to go back to PT school, or try and get into PT school, because there's no guarantee you're going to get in. So I went back to school and had to keep taking, some more prerequisites, even though I already had a background in science, had to take a ton of prerequisites. So I was working full-time, going to school part-time, and I didn't have enough time in my schedule to fit in all of my ballet classes and my Pilates classes. So I dropped the Pilates, cut back on ballet, and I sat on my butt a lot, studying in an attempt to get into PT school. And I really think that's what started the cascade of events, was not moving. And, as I say in my book, sitting is evil.
Yeah. That's a pretty good summary.
Yeah, that's it. Bingo.
Anything we do habitually for 8 hours a day,
yeah,
is that way. But sitting is something we really do. And, we don't move the spine. And there we go.
Yep.
And you can't do it. So at what point did you get interested in Feldenkrais? How did that fit into this whole
oh, this big puzzle. How did I get interested? I had heard about it. I live in Denver, and in the Denver Boulder area, there is a very big population even back then, because this was 30 years ago, a huge population of alternative health healers. Even the one thing I did when I was teaching myself how to move again, the only other thing I did was I added acupuncture. And as a Western medically trained person, I was so mortified that somebody might see me walking into an acupuncturist's clinic that, oh my gosh, that would be the worst thing in the world. Well, then I realized this stuff is amazing. So cranial sacral therapy, Alexander technique, all kind of different healing modalities, very rich in the Denver Boulder area. So I had always seen like flyers for Feldenkrais, but it made me curious because, wow, what a word, Feldenkrais, what the heck is that? But then I would see the flyers and they would describe what Feldenkrais was, and it made no sense to me. Yeah. And it didn't capture my attention at all. And then they would have like little diagrams of these stick figures and, bent leg positions and bent arms. And I thought, why would anybody want to do that? And so then I studied a little bit. I took some Alexander lessons, and I thought they were nice, but really didn't really resonate with me. And then one day I heard that there was going to be a Feldenkrais practitioner coming from Taos, New Mexico, up to Denver, and was going to do a 3-day workshop called Feldenkrais for Dancers. And I thought, well, okay, 50% of me can be on board with that. Still not sure what this Feldenkrais stuff is, but I know what dance is. And anything that's going to help my dance technique, I was all for. So that very first day, that I had no idea what in the world we were doing. But when I was going home after that first day in a 3-day workshop, I knew I had to pursue this. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to do it.
So what happened there was interesting, because up to a certain point in our life, we have certain experiences and we've kind of shut other ones out. But when you went to an acupuncturist, that opened the whole mindset a little bit. It opened the door for you to, hey, this stuff really works. Let's, maybe there's some more things I don't know about. And so some points in our lives are transition points, and they open doors for us. And so at that point, they had made Feldenkrais applicable to your life.
Right.
And what you end up doing is going through a process of exploring so much. You're exploring one function maybe, and you might explore that for an hour, asking yourself questions about, how am I doing this? And what does it feel like? And what's the left? And what's the right? And what's the difference between when I started and all of that? By the time you get done, even if you don't know what you did, you've been introduced to a process that's now available to you in other settings. And it's very likely to be helpful.
And even though I didn't know what we were doing, really, I didn't know anything about what was going on. I was just following along, and I felt so light. I felt so free. I felt so comfortable not only in my physical body, my physical self, but even my mind and my spirit. And I was going through, at that point that I was taking that workshop, I was going through another really big bump in the road of life. So I had the rug pulled out from underneath me again for something else. And so I was really going through a lot of physical and emotional, changes and challenges. So it was the perfect time to find this method. And after that 3-day weekend, I was talking to a bunch of people and I said, I have got to do this. Still hadn't paid off my physical therapy school loan, but we're working on it. And I knew it was a 4-year training, and I said, I have got to do it. And then I found out that the closest training, to Denver would be in Taos, or I could go to Chicago, or I could go to LA or San Francisco. And that is just financially prohibitive because, for the people who don't know what a Feldenkrais training is like, we meet every 3 months for 2 weeks. So those 2 weeks full time, you are in this training. So basically you're not at work 2 months out of the year for 4 years. Then you have to pay for your travel and the room and board. So I said, well, I can't do it. But if they ever brought a Feldenkrais training to Denver, I would sign up in a heartbeat. And about a year later, one of the local practitioners called me and said, hey, guess what? They're bringing a training to Denver. And so I said, okay. And I applied, and I was their first student that applied for the Rocky Mountain One training and got accepted.
Yeah, no, I know who was involved in organizing that training. They're great people. So,
they are great people.
Yeah. A similar story with me. There were no trainings, and then I'm running by the laundromat where my wife is doing the laundry, and she's reading an ad paper there, and she says, hey, look. And they were offering a training close enough by that I could do it. Anyway, she said, you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And we made it through that. But the point is, it was a huge commitment because, first of all, for me, I had to take a job that would allow it. That means my work never did give me quite the hours I needed in the first place. So I'm already making ends meet. And then you have to go out of town and find this little space in an attic to sleep in. And you have to pay for your tuition, which you can hardly afford. And you have to limit what you eat during the year, to pay for it. And then I had to sell my van to pay for one session of it. And I had to actually dip into my, that was part of it, part of my PTA education too, but I had to dip into whatever thrift savings plan I had. And it was just a tremendous commitment. So the point is, you really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from then on, at some point, you were not in chronic pain anymore.
No, I actually, it took me about 9 months when I made that decision that I was no longer going to follow the regular, the traditional Western medical model that I was following because it wasn't working. And so once I started just the movement exploration, the self-awareness, paying attention to the way I moved, what irritated my back and exacerbated my pain, what made it feel better, and adding the acupuncture, it took about 9 months. And then I was pain-free. And about that same time was when I received my letter that I was accepted into the graduate program for physical therapy at CU, Health Sciences Center.
Where was it?
Colorado University Health Sciences Center.
Oh, yeah. In Boulder.
Yeah. Well, no, the main campus is in Boulder, but the Health Sciences Center was actually not far from me here in Denver. And now it's moved to, crosstown. They call it now. I can't remember, and Shoots Medical Center, something like that.
Okay.
But
yeah.
And that's where they are now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, I'm sure, inspired you to write your book, Forever Fit and Flexible. And what's the subtitle?
Feeling fabulous at 50 and beyond.
Yeah. And I assume you were already beyond 50 at that point.
Let me think. Oh,
that wasn't that long
yes.
ago.
No, that wasn't that long ago. So the book was published right when I was turning 60 is when it was published. Mhm.
Yeah. 60 was a good year.
Well, yeah, it was. 50 was my best. I mean, when I turned 50, it was almost like, you could hear angels singing the Hallelujah chorus. I mean, it was the greatest time of my life, because up until that point, my 20s were okay. I mean, my 30s were really not good, and my 40s were much worse. So I was like running toward 50 thinking it's got to get better from here. So when I turned 50, and maybe it was because I had that mindset, things are going to change, I'm going to get my life together a little bit better than I had it before. And I was right. So my 50s were so amazing that when I turned 60, I went running toward it with open arms going, bring it on, baby.
Yep. All right. So you wrote your book,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing I was impressed with is how you gently and thoroughly made the case for awareness. Awareness is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that is the main theme in your book, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. And I love the way you said it. You said it in a very gentle way, more so than I would have said it. But, I do it in a gentle way, but I do it with all of the persistence of a dog with a bone. I don't let it go.
And we both know about dogs with bones.
Yes, we do. Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
That is one big characteristic of dogs. They're persistent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and the first part of the book is an introduction to awareness, and then you have a little program in there. Can you tell us about that program?
I do. I call it the Forever Fit and Flexible program. And of course, when people see my book, they think, oh God, here we go, another, book about fitness and, go to the gym, lift these weights, do all of this. And they're surprised when they get into the book, or I explain it a little bit more, that it is about the self-awareness, the mindset, really being gentle with yourself, paying attention to yourself. And I add in the book the Fit and Flexible program, and they're not exercises. They are movement explorations. I call them movement lessons. So they are based on Feldenkrais. And these movement patterns are not only based on Feldenkrais, they're also based on martial arts, Pilates, and dance. Because as you know, we all know, movement is movement. But when you really look at some of the movement arts, or even the artistic quality of movement, running, you're a runner. People think about running, they don't necessarily think about art. But
That's too bad. Yeah.
It is too bad, because there is definitely an artistic quality to running, which is something that I have learned a little bit about through Feldenkrais, but it really hit home in talking to you and another gentleman that I connected with, who wrote a book, Stop Running, Start Gliding. So there is a way of being able to do something like running as we get older into our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, to be able to do it in a way that is comfortable and easy on our body, rather than tearing our body apart and tearing it down. We can actually build it up by doing something like running, downhill skiing, tennis, getting down and on the floor and back up again without having to grab onto furniture. All of these things just really add up to really help us live a life of health and vitality at every stage of life.
Yeah. Now, that's something you mentioned in your book that's always been important to me. I always thought that had a lot to do with balance and not being afraid of everything, and especially falling, but the ability to get down on the floor and back up, that is something you emphasized in your book.
Yeah.
And it did wonders for some of the people that you work with, that you gave examples of in your book. Yeah. So I think it's difficult to do some movement lessons when they're just written down. And you suggested, I think, that people read them into a tape recorder or do them with someone else, which is a very good suggestion. But the lessons in your book are brief enough that you can do them yourself and get a very good introduction to what you're talking about in the book.
And that is really what the hope is, that it would, when people try these lessons or they read the instructions, that they'll think, wow, that's really interesting. I never thought of that. How can I explore this at a deeper level? And you don't have to go all in. You don't have to do what you and I did and spend 4 years becoming a Feldenkrais practitioner, but just taking little sips and little tastes of what we have out there and what Feldenkrais and other movement arts have to offer to people. It's just amazing that how much is out there, and we don't realize it. We just keep thinking that we have to work harder and harder and harder, and that just beats our body up instead of building it up.
Right. And so that's why we need people like Cheryl, because there is so much out there. But she can, I know my own experience, when I began to explore some of these things, I didn't fully understand them. I really needed some help in understanding the method. What the heck is this? And so we're going to get into that later, but it would be great to work with Cheryl if you have any questions about any of these things. So forever fit and flexible. Let's take it a step farther now. Let's go into the swords that are at your back there on the rack. I think that's a walnut rack. Very nice.
I think so. Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. But the swords that are at your back, we know that Moshe Feldenkrais is very famous for having been a black belt in judo. Mm-hmm. And he used what he learned there as some of the foundation for his method. And I think that he thought originally when he saw a judo demonstration, it looked like a dance, and he thought it was fake.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And but then he delved into it, and he even wrote a book on the physics of it, mm-hmm. explaining how it worked. And it fascinated him, and he took that up, and it became a movement puzzle, a foundation of his method too, something that he found great value in. So can you comment now, since I know that you are a ninja and you have a black belt in a martial art, Ninpo Tai Jutsu?
Yes.
Oh,
very good.
Yeah.
Bravo.
So, yeah, thank you. It's not something you would pronounce the very first time.
No, you don't. It took me about 2 years to be able to learn how to pronounce it correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so can you comment on the relationship between the martial arts and Feldenkrais?
Absolutely. When I first started my training, my Feldenkrais training, I had already had probably about a year, maybe a little bit more than that, under my belt, pardon the pun, of martial arts training. And, they kept saying, Feldenkrais is really based on the martial arts and has its roots in martial arts. And I would just be lying there on the floor, shaking my head going, I just don't see it. I do not see it at all. Yeah. So it took me a while, at least another year, maybe more, to see that incredible connection and the relationship of dance, the martial arts that Moshe said is like a dance. Yeah. And the martial arts and the Feldenkrais method, and just that quality of movement. And what I like to think of, Feldenkrais is actually, it's a movement art, but it's also based on the art of survival. And that is really huge through a lot of the lessons that I've done from, Feldenkrais lessons, and even what I have gleaned from a lot of the readings that I've done, by Moshe Feldenkrais. And I have to admit, I really struggle reading some of his stuff. It probably took me a year to read Awareness Through Movement, the basic book. And my chiropractor got the book and he says, oh my gosh, it was so fascinating. I read it in like 3 days. Yeah. How did you do that? But yeah, it's the philosophy. It's about being able to move, not being stuck in patterns, to be able to, if a tiger just came running through my basement right now, I would be able to move it a nanosecond without having to do any preparatory movement. So the body is always in motion. Even when we're asleep, our bodies are always in motion, even when we're perfectly still. There's still an awful lot going on internally. So using that concept of motion and that concept of always, fluidity in your movement, fluidity in your body, flexibility in your mind and your brain and your awareness keeps you safe as well as healthy.
Exactly. So that opens up quite a bit. So yes, the story I heard about Moshe, that he was not compulsive about this, but whenever he would get into a car, he would take at least 30 seconds to check out. Every car is different. Where's the door handle? Where are the seatbelt? Where's the mirrors? Where's this? Where's that? You know, he would always be aware because survival was a big part of his life through some of the difficult things that he went through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he went through a lot of life-threatening experiences.
Yes, he did. He had a fascinating life story. I can't remember the name of the second book by Norman Doidge, Dr. Doidge. And
It's something like How the Brain Heals.
yeah,
I don't have
something
the
like
words
that.
quite right.
Right. But the chapter that he wrote about Feldenkrais and the history of Moshe went into a lot more depth than what I had known about him. And it was just fascinating. I mean, the man was truly amazing, truly amazing. And he barely escaped with his life, at the beginning of World War II.
And before, when
Yes.
he left for Palestine, and yeah,
By foot.
And when he lived in, for months, I guess the journey took.
Yeah.
And when he lived there, it was a dangerous place.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, so survival is definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was doing was, I think he understood the martial arts better than some of the people who teach martial arts here.
Oh, absolutely.
And so what do we have? We have, he would take something and he would break it down, several lessons for you to learn how to do a judo roll.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a survival thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, or several lessons for you to learn to do reversible movement as you're trying to learn how to do a handstand or headstand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To keep you safe. I mean, so you can understand the entirety of the movement rather than just trying to do something. Maybe you did it, maybe you didn't, and maybe you fell and hurt yourself.
Well, and it sounds a little crazy to think of doing a handstand or a headstand as a survival mechanism. But if you're doing it and then you do that element of reversibility that you're talking about,
yeah,
that is so ingrained in the nervous system that it's opening up even more possibilities of movement that you would have if you were in a situation where you were either threatened or, dangerous or, whatever. So it's, I think the term that I hear all the time is vocabulary of movement. So as you're doing the Feldenkrais lessons, you're actually expanding your vocabulary and making more movement available to you. And this is a little off the subject, but maybe not much. I just lying on the floor was really, really hard for me in Feldenkrais, even with a lot of padding and stuff. Hardwood floor was a beautiful venue that we were in, an old dance hall. But so I had multiple pads and stuff because, oh my God, I'm going to die, on this floor. It's so hard. It's so hard. And even I couldn't do any of the lessons where you're lying on your front. And because it was just too, even though I didn't have back pain anymore, that would really stress my back and my neck. It was miserable. And I was talking to one of my classmates who I just loved and adored, and, we're deep in conversation. And I says, I just can't do it. All of these lessons when we lie on our front, I cannot lie on my front side, which is the Feldenkrais way of saying it. I said, it just doesn't happen. I says, and I really believe I can live a long and healthy, happy life without ever having to lie on my stomach. So, we went through the lesson and we, went through, like half of the day, and then we're taking a break right before lunch and we're talking again in a deep conversation, and her eyes got really big and she's pointing at me. And I thought, what, have like wardrobe malfunction? What? And I looked and I was lying on my front side. I was lying on my stomach with my head turned, talking to her, absolutely comfortable.
Yeah.
On this hard, cold floor. And it was like how that so much changed in my nervous system to be able to do that without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I often thought through some of those lessons that we began to do a certain movement and explore it in so many different positions and movements that you haven't done for years. I mean, why would you do that normally in life?
Mhm.
And then I realized that, wow, no wonder I have stiffness somewhere, or I can't do this so well. We never explore any of our potential. You know, we can do all these things. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So now, would you comment on the difference between uh, moving easily to learn and moving easily to be efficient in something you're doing and just relaxing?
I don't think I could differentiate the two. I think that they're one and the same because even, if I take a ballet class, and heaven knows I've been doing ballet now for over 40 years, I'm moving to learn. So even as I'm going through, I could just do it mindlessly and just go through the patterns and stuff. But every time we go through a class, it's like, what's happening here? How can I make this a little bit easier? How can I make it, lighter, longer, more fluid? So I'm always doing that in the back of my mind as we're dancing. And I'm learning so much as I'm going through that process. And then I get the benefit of, well, now my body is less stiff. It's moving more fluidly. It's easier. I can wake up in the morning and just roll out of bed without, groaning, and just be ready for the day.
Okay, so let me lead you in another direction.
Okay.
And so obviously we want to be as efficient as we can, and we don't want to make a movement as hard as we can because we're good at that already. And so and I know people like this, couldn't you just relax, lay back, take a nap, have a beer, and couldn't you make that your life? Wouldn't that be relaxing? Sit
Well,
on the beach?
I have been known to do that. And I've
Right,
got nothing against naps and beer.
right, right. But I know people who make that their life. Very relaxing.
Well, yeah, I, I I can see how they might find that relaxing, but for some of us, I think we would make that would be anxiety provoking.
Yeah. So now we have Feldenkrais, who used uh, the martial arts, for him, judo, as one of the foundations of his method. And so here we are learning to do things slowly so that we can sense more, so that we can know what the heck we actually are doing, so we can
Mhm,
do it better.
mhm.
And he did say, I heard him in a lecture in video not too long ago, and you do it slowly, you do it slowly, you do it slowly. And after you do it slowly and slowly and slowly, you can do it 10 times faster than you could do it before.
Exactly.
And so we have the idea of doing these things slowly, then bringing more efficiency into life. And then we have the idea of being a warrior.
Mhm.
So when we think about being a warrior, we don't necessarily think about relaxing, but we do think about beautiful, elegant, efficient movements.
Mhm.
So, uh, so talk about how we combine all that into one piece. And being a warrior, uh, I don't think it doesn't inspire me that much that people have the ability to kill,
Mhm.
but it does inspire me when people have the ability to have the mindset of an inner or a spiritual warrior towards life, uh, the balance in the martial arts and so on. So could you comment on how that whole picture comes together for you?
Sure. Lots to unpack there. So let's just start with the spirit of a warrior, because when people think of martial arts, a lot of times, or they think of a warrior, they think of warfare, fighting, conflict, violence, and that is definitely not the true spirit of a warrior. A warrior spirit is one of compassion. It's one of love of, of life, love of family, community, love of nature. and very much nurturing spirit, nurturing your family, your community, protecting and taking care of people who really don't have the ability to take care of themselves, looking out for people, and looking out again for nature, taking care of things, I guess, there I'm going back to my little sugar plum tree.
Yeah.
And that's part of what a warrior is. And a warrior also, though, will set clear boundaries and is very committed to keeping those boundaries. So if someone tries to breach that boundary, the warrior will not start fighting. It's like, I'm sorry, we're not going to do this. Please, I don't want to, get involved, or, step back, you're kind of crossing the line until they push it to the limit that you have to do something to defend yourself. So it's not that we're looking for a fight. We're looking to go home at the end of every single day and to be with our families and take care of them. So it's not about fighting, but don't push it. Don't push it, because we do have tools that we will use. And it's also about choosing your battles and choosing them very wisely. And one of the first things that we learn as a beginning student is to get out of the way of an attack. Evade. If you're not there, you can't get hurt. And at the very beginning, probably for a whole year, I was really good at it, because anytime one of the guys went to attack me, I would throw my gi top over my head and go running off the mat screaming, "Don't touch me." And they complained to my sensei and they said, "She's cheating. She's not letting us beat her up, or she's not letting us attack her." And he just would shrug his shoulders and say, "Hey, she got out of the way. Isn't that the point?" And then as I got a little more comfortable, then I was able to stay on the mat and then, engage a little bit more. So yeah, but that did last about a year. But that's what you do. The very first thing you want is, you don't want to be drawn into a conflict if you can avoid it. So evade. And so that's the first step. The second step is you can evade the hit that's coming, and then you can deflect it out of the way, wax on, wax off, and then redirect. You can redirect the person's energy. So all of that negative energy from that attacker, and attacks come in a variety of different ways: physical, mental, emotional, verbal, blah, blah, blah. Instead of absorbing all of that negative energy, you're able to deflect it and redirect it back into the attacker themselves. So their own negative energy beats themselves up and you walk away safe.
So what you're talking about there, okay, so you talked about redirecting and so on. And just interviewed a hypnotherapist not too long ago. He said, his life was being, by the way, that was beautiful what you said.
Oh,
and I think it described you wonderfully, but it also described Moshe.
Wow, that's an honor.
Yeah, the compassion and the service that he did. But this hypnotherapist said he said, "I have very little ego anymore." He said, and he gave as an example someone cutting him off in traffic, and he would just say, "Love you, buddy." Yeah. Of course, the other person doesn't hear that, but that's his response.
The other person doesn't hear it, but he hears it. His nervous system hears it. He goes home in a much more calm frame of mind, rather than, "Oh, you jerk, blah, blah, blah." I mean, who's that hurting? It wouldn't hurt the other guy in the car because he can't hear him anyhow.
Yeah.
But it just comes back to hurt you.
Exactly. So what would you say about being in the moment? And so martial arts are a practice, right? They don't do you any good if you don't practice them. Same thing with ballet. You wouldn't be able to, you put it aside. They say that once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget it. But don't ride a bike for 10 years and then see how good you are at making a good turn.
Yeah.
And you never forget it, but you can't do it skillfully anymore.
Right.
And without fear. So what would you say about your practice? How does martial arts, how does Feldenkrais affect your practice of living?
It is so intertwined in everything that I do now in my life. that I oftentimes don't even think about it. I just do. I just notice myself sometimes when I'm cleaning the kitchen, the way that I'm moving as I'm, wiping down the counters. It's very martial. It's very Feldenkrais. It's very, well, isn't that interesting that I'm on this leg more than the other one? Is that why maybe my right foot is sore when, I do certain things? And just, it's always these little questions. And people might think, well, that's got to be absolutely exhausting. And it's not. I mean, it is at first when you're going through the training, because you are like, waking up. So it's like so much is going on in there that it's almost, it is exhausting. It's incredibly hard work. And it doesn't look like hard work because all you do is rolling around on the floor.
But your brain is working overtime. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. So yeah, I never ate so much in my life. It was like I had to feed my brain with everything else. But I actually had one of my friends I went to PT school with her, and she kind of was poo-pooing Feldenkrais, and oh, it's just hanging crystals, it's this and that. And I looked at her and I said, Cindy, you know me. You honestly believe that I would spend 4 years of my life and my time and my effort and my money learning something that was, hanging, it was foo-foo. Not saying anything derogatory about hanging crystals, because I've learned a lot about those lately too, and that's fascinating. But that's it. She was just kind of like putting it down as being this, thing that doesn't really work. It was voodoo. But interestingly enough, she had arranged for me to do an in-service for the entire rehab hospital that she worked at. So a Feldenkrais in service, with a lesson. So I had PTs, OTs, speech language pathologists, I had sociologists. So the place was packed. And, still Cindy was not convinced. And she kept saying, it's voodoo and all this stuff. And then finally, at the end of the class, when everybody was giving their input, several of them looked at her and said, see, Cindy, we told you so. And then she says, but this has got to be exhausting, paying attention to yourself all the time.
Yeah. At first, yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, it is, but you're not constantly, doing it. I says, it's just something that's introduced gradually. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't have to think that hard about doing it because you've done it for a while. So it's like, okay, I'm just paying attention. I hear something different. What is that noise that I hear? Is that a bird? Is that a horn in the distance? It's like every single one of your senses become awakened in a good way. It's not hypervigilant, but it's like you're always paying attention in a way that's curious and interesting, not like, oh, I heard a sound in the middle of the night, somebody must be breaking in. It's like, the house is settling again.
Yeah. I like that about just being curious. Yeah. And there's another thing about the Feldenkrais method. If you want to do push-ups, you have to keep doing them. If you don't do push-ups for a couple months, you're not very good at it anymore. Mm-hmm. But people will tell hikers that they need to do a little yoga routine at the end of each day or something. That's not going to happen. If you walk 20 to 30 miles with a pack over rough trails every day, you need to get to bed. Mm-hmm. And but have you done some of these things before, and have you have this certain mindset? The slightest movement once you lay down of the ankles that affects the whole body, or just having that experience in yourself. And that carries throughout the day, because there's times when you draw attention to this or that, and how you're doing this or that, and how it's going. And when you sit down to take a break, you just don't have to work very hard, right, to get the benefit of being aware a lot of the times during your life, and of building some of these things in. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to do them all the time to maintain a lot of the benefit. This is really interesting because once I started my training, it was probably, toward the end of the first year, I stopped stretching completely. And I'd go to ballet class and everybody would be doing the same silly stretches, leg on the bar, blah, 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 blah. And I would just lie on the floor and I would just move slightly, and they would, laugh and, what are you doing? You're taking a nap? And I would just ignore them. And I would feel so much better, just 5 minutes of doing that, standing up. And I would feel so, I keep using the word organized, in my body. And all of the movements were my hips were so loose. I had no tension, no tightness anywhere. My flexibility was amazing. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Cheryl, is there anything else you would like to tell people from your book?
Well, there's a lot of information in it. And I think the one thing I would really like to emphasize is some of the feedback I get from the people who've read my book is that they said the biggest light bulb moment for them was when they realized, oh, I need to be more gentle with myself. And especially when it's a book that's talking about fitness, everybody thinks they have to just beat themselves up. And it's like, no, there's another way of doing it.
If you knew how to infuse this idea into people, you would have more people that came to your fitness classes, because they wouldn't say, I'm not going to that class because I'd have to take a couple other classes or I'd have to spend a lot of time working on myself to get ready to do that.
Right. Right.
It wouldn't be so forbidding. It would be something you could go step by step into.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the fitness classes in some cases could be fuller
Mm-hmm.
if people would put this concept out.
I think I might have already told you this. I taught a workshop at a dance studio, a Pilates workshop, hour and a half long workshop on mat workout. And I was very, very, in my sneaky ninja way, I was infusing an awful lot of Feldenkrais in the Pilates workout that we were doing. And I mean, these are women who are pretty strong and fit, and most of them were fairly young. And it was wonderful to just see the changes in their bodies. And when they stood up and they were moving, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so tall. I feel so light. I feel so effortless. And it was, thank you, Moshe.
Yeah. The whole mindset has a big influence on what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Moshe saying, okay, bend over and stretch and touch your toes or whatever, sitting on the floor. And then he would say, no, don't do, now I'm making things up, but he would say, okay, now don't do that. Now just gently massage down your leg and just feel the shape. Maybe you've never felt the shape of your hamstrings and of your, and then come down and feel the shape of your knee. And now gently and pleasantly massage your calves. And you find that without any pain, because you changed your mindset and the way you feel about it, you have overcome a lot of the resistance to it, and you can already move much better. And
well, and plus, and plus it takes away I'm touching my leg, I have to massage it because it's tight.
Yeah.
Because then there is.
You're looking for pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're looking for an answer, you're looking for an end result rather than that sense of exploration. Like you said, the shape of your knee.
Yeah.
But your knee is feeling the shape of your hand.
Yeah.
At the same time. So it's that reciprocal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So everyone listening, the spirit of the warrior, I believe, from listening to you, is about living well. Would you agree with that?
I would say living well and looking good. And I like to say, and this is just me being a little snarky, that living well and looking good is the best revenge.
I love it. Okay, Cheryl, where can people get your book?
You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble's online. You can also just go to my website, CherylIlov.com, and click on a link there that will take you to the book. I have another book that's coming out probably in a month or so, The Reluctant Ninja. It's over there. And it is the story, it chronicles my journey of the male-dominated, testosterone-infested world of men in martial art.
I take issue with that word, infested.
Well, and it's really funny because most of the time I was the only woman in class. And there was one time I got talked into taking a seminar, duh. And when my sensei said, don't worry, there'll be plenty of women there. And it's like, I've been at the dojo for 6 months. I've only seen one woman so far, but okay, there'll be plenty of women at the seminar. And I go walking in and I was the only woman within like a 3-mile radius. And the next level I was a yellow belt, and the next level, lowest level to me was a brown belt, and nothing but men. And it was like testosterone was just, rolling down the walls and clashing with my perfume. And yeah, it was just a very incredible experience of going through that martial arts training. And I still am training at this point in my life. So
Cheryl has 2 books. One will be coming out soon. And what is your website, Cheryl?
it's just www.cherylilov.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you get 3 downloads. You can download 3 audio recordings of kind of like a Feldenkrais miniature lesson. I call it meditation through movement lessons. So it'd give you a chance to be able to get a kind of an idea of what a Feldenkrais lesson might be like. And if you like it, then you can check out Scott's online classes, because you've got online classes going on.
Well, I do. Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you can do that. So are there any other links that you would like to give us? By the way, you can work with Cheryl, correct?
Yes, you can. Yes,
and
you can.
Go to her website and you'll see how you can work with her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Cheryl, one more question.
Sure.
What is your personal power? What is personal power?
What it is for me, or what it means like for anybody?
Both.
My personal power, I think, comes from my incredible tenacity of spirit and my incomparable stubbornness. And using that power to really feed my inner strength and put myself out there and try new things and get out of my comfort zone. So that's pretty much it. According to, I cannot speak for anybody else what their personal power is. That would be something for them to explore.
But the general idea, though,
the general idea is being comfortable with yourself, knowing yourself, having that self-awareness, not denigrating yourself, even in jest, because your nervous system is always listening, and that recording it, and eventually you will believe it. So be nice to yourself and just keep on learning. And your own personal power and your warrior spirit will start to grow. It doesn't have to be found in martial arts. That's just the way I found mine, and it worked. It can be found in running. It can be found hiking in the mountains. It could be found fly fishing.
Yeah.
Anything that, movement, learning, exploration, and anything that feeds your soul.
Yeah. So the reason I ask you that question, other than that it's a great question, I think, is we have your website. We know we can work with you. We have your 2 books. So one's coming out soon, but the other one we can buy immediately. And you do have the Femininja Project podcast. And I thought that question kind of leads into that. So you want to say one or 2 words or a million words about the podcast?
I do have a podcast. I have some fantastic guests on it, like yourself. And it is a podcast about overcoming obstacles, personal empowerment, restoring human dignity, finding your voice, standing your ground, alternative health and healing, living well, and looking good. So it is loosely based on my experience as a martial artist, but of course it also includes a lot of the alternative methods that I have studied, that my guests have studied, just to help educate people and have the listeners understand that you never are really truly stuck, that there's always an answer. It might be a little bit deviated from the norm. Maybe you have to
today.
Might not come today, might not come next week. It might, not come for a while, but it will come if you keep an open mind, you keep looking for it. And I love having men, do have a lot of men on my show. It's not about, it's not about feminism. It's about humanity.
Humanity, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we have your website, we have your books, And how can they get to your podcast? How would you like to direct them to that?
Go to thefemininjaproject.com. So I actually have a website that is the Femininja Project. It is, primarily for the podcast. All the episodes are listed there with full descriptions and all of the links of my guests, because some of the other platforms you don't have enough room to put all of the links on. I have a really cool tiger on the front of the homepage, and it's just a really, fun little site, and you can just, a lot of different guests and topics that we cover. And we love dogs. I actually had a dog trainer on a few weeks ago. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to put all those links in the description, and you can work with Cheryl. You can get your vitality back. You can get out of chronic pain, and you can learn to live.
Mm-hmm. Live well and look good.
Live well and look good. That's excellent. Cheryl, thank you.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to be with you.
It was a great interview.